Welcome back to the Canadian Concussion Center's webinar series, which is sponsored by the Labor's International Union of North America, LIUNA. My name is Leslie Rattan. I'm really pleased to be moderating our session. And the sessions were developed for individuals that have sustained concussions, for those around them, their caregivers, as well as healthcare providers. And if you've been with us before, our sessions focus on various aspects of concussion. And we typically have a presentation that runs for the first half, and we will be having that this evening. And then we will open it up to you in the audience if you have any questions. And just so you know, if you haven't been with us before, our sessions do occur every other Tuesday evening, same time, same place, and these are free. You just have to register. We always begin our sessions as well by acknowledging the indigenous peoples of all the lands that we are on today. We're meeting, even as we're meeting virtually, it's important to recognize the lands we each call home and reaffirm our commitment to improving relationships and understanding with local Indigenous peoples. From coast to coast, we honor the ancestral and unceded territories of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this land home. So for this evening's session, again, if you haven't been with us before, if you do have any questions that you want to pose to our speakers tonight, we ask that you put those into the Q&A. If you scroll your cursor to the bottom, you'll see a Q&A. And so you just have to click on that, enter any questions that you have over the course of the session. And then once the presentation is finished, we will address those. If you're having any technical problems, please enter those into the chat and Christian can give you a hand. Just to also let you know that all of our sessions are recorded and archived, so you can find all of them on the Canadian Concussion Center's website under the education portion of the site. As we do every week, we usually run a short poll, so I'm just going to ask Christian to pull that up. We really like to get a sense of who is in the audience. So I will just give you a second to do that. And also to let you know, thank you, Christian. He has actually put the link in the chat if you're interested in just getting to that place on our website where all of our previous presentations are housed. Okay. So for this evening's session, this is a new one for us, and I'm really excited to welcome Conor Gormally and Malayka Gormally from Concussion Alliance, who are going to be speaking to us tonight. Conor is the Chief Executive Officer who co-founded Concussion Alliance in 2018 with Malayka Gormally, following Conor's struggles to find timely and effective care for persistent post-concussion symptoms that they still navigate on a daily basis. A vocal patient advocate with a compelling personal story, Conor has spent the last 7 years working with leading researchers and clinicians to create accessible education, awareness, and advocacy tools to improve the outcomes for concussion patients. Since 2019, Conor has been Concussion Alliance's internship program director, overseeing the professional development of 122 graduates from more than a dozen colleges and universities. Since 2021, Conor has been a member of the Repercussion Group, an international group whose mission it is to insist upon ethical and transparent evidence-based research and guideline development concerning trauma-induced brain injury, utilizing a person-centered perspective. As part of the group, Conor co-authored a position paper on the 2022 Consensus Conference on Concussion in Sport. Malayka Gormally serves as the Chief Operating Officer for Concussion Alliance. Malayka co-founded Concussion Alliance with her son Conor Gormally in 2018 after becoming a knowledgeable and passionate patient advocate for Conor. Malayka spearheaded the initiative to add accessibility software to the Concussion Alliance website and has helped build a diverse team on the board of directors, the expert advisory board, and the visiting internship faculty. She has overseen the design of a comprehensive, accessible, patient-facing website about concussion management and treatment options, and is the executive editor of the Concussion Alliance bi-weekly newsletter on new concussion research. Malayka has been a small business entrepreneur for several decades, and her entrepreneurship and business experience guide the growth and financial development of Concussion Alliance. Her successful career in visual art and her strong visual design sense have contributed to the creation of Concussion Alliance's visual style and brand. Malayka is an alumna of Swarthmore College in Swarthmore, Pennsylvania. So I'm really, really pleased and looking forward to hearing from both of you. And with that, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you so much. We're so grateful to Dr. Rutten and Dr. Tater and Christian Peterson and everyone else at the Canadian Concussion Center webinar series at UHN and at University of Toronto for having us here tonight. If you don't know about our Concussion Update newsletter, which I mentioned in Malayka's bio, we have been advertising this webinar series in our newsletter for many years now, and hopefully bringing lots of attendees to these sessions. And so we're very excited to now be giving a session. So today, Malayka and I are going to talk a little bit about creating accessible patient-facing resources. So we're going to start with a quick video, though, to sort of demonstrate a little bit of the need for the kinds of resources that we're going to be talking about.
Michelle was living in New York City when she got a concussion in July of 2022.
Basically, I suffered a concussion in July of 2022. I was one of those people who had no understanding of how concussions worked at all. It happened on a Friday morning, and I texted my boss, "I'll be good as new Monday." Like, I'll be fine. You have to laugh because otherwise you'll cry thinking about that. But I really didn't know. And I went to urgent care and they said, "You're fine, just go home." And I said, "I don't feel fine. Like, this feels really serious." And they said, "If you want to go to the ER, you can, but you really don't have to." I went, and same thing, "You're fine, go home and rest." They handed me a packet that said rest for 2 to 4 weeks. Don't look at your phone, don't move around, don't do anything, all of that. And I thought, okay, that's what I'll do.
The advice to rest for weeks, or as long as there are symptoms, was replaced by recommendations for active rehabilitation as best practice in international consensus guidelines in 2017. Further, researchers have learned that complete rest impedes recovery and increases the risk of persisting symptoms. However, Michelle was one of the many patients whose primary care and emergency department providers told her to rest until her symptoms resolved.
Finally, again, in with a neurologist in February. And he says, "Okay, you're doing too much. You need to go on a medical leave of absence and do even more nothing." He said, "Don't do anything that brings on symptoms." So naturally, I got worse. But I didn't want to WebMD myself, because we all know that trope of looking something up and convincing yourself something's terribly wrong. So I sort of avoided looking things up. I thought, this is what the doctors are telling me. They're the experts. I don't want to go against that. But at this point, I was like, I need to find something. And I'm Googling and came across this website, Concussion Alliance. And it was a very nice looking website, very official. It had all the right things in the right places. All of these research articles and sources and guides. And I was like, where has this been? What is this? And my mind just exploded. And really what came immediately was grief, because I was like, this has been here the whole time, and everything in this website is the exact opposite of what the last 5 or 6 doctors have told me over the last 8 months. And my heart broke. I really couldn't believe it. And at the same time, I was thankful because I was like, this is here. I finally have answers. I finally have direction. I finally have resources, links that I can click to take me to providers and programs and options, where before that I had nothing. All I was told was literally nothing. So it was this kind of watershed moment of like, oh wow, like I've had it all wrong. The doctors have had it all wrong. And now I'm in this sort of terrible place and I need to put the pieces back together.
Michelle spoke with us in April 2024. She's still navigating persisting symptoms, but has found healthcare providers and rehabilitative therapies that have helped her improve significantly.
So, the reason that Michelle was able to find these resources, these Concussion Alliance resources that were an inflection point for her recovery, that brought her hope, that helped her get motivated to find providers and find people out there who were knowledgeable and could help her, is because when I looked and when Malayka looked, when I was on medical leave from my freshman fall term of undergraduate studies in college, we didn't find anything. And with, 6 weeks out, 3 months out, working with, with various providers and sort of not getting recommendations for rehabilitation or referrals, Malayka and I were sort of in a similar place to Michelle, where we had kind of fallen out. And this was, my fourth diagnosed concussion in the span of something like 2.5 years. I had gotten 3 as a high school athlete with sort of varying recovery timelines. The first injury, it was, significant. I got headbutted in the temple wrestling, and it was 3 months before I had returned to play. And my last concussion was I just took a header wrong in a soccer game, and I was fully asymptomatic and back to work in 10 days. But with this fourth concussion, I didn't get better. And it took me so long to find proper care that by the time I had, a lot of my symptoms had chronicified or chronicized in different ways. And so there was all of this undoing of this other chronic illness that had sort of grown out of the initial injury, to the point where it's 9 years on now. And I've had a headache constantly. And we were just at the IBA World Congress on brain injury in Montreal, and I was constantly managing concussion symptoms at a concussion conference on, on behalf of Concussion Alliance. So it's really been a driving force behind this.
Yeah, so from the parents' perspective, we were given a lot of advice by doctors and honestly by friends too, or acquaintances on Facebook, that we then found out were incorrect. So one of them is rest in a dark room during the day, and that are called cooning, and that research says now that it slows recovery. Even today, probably a majority of general care, family doctors will say rest until symptoms resolve, which research also shows slows recovery and increases the risk of persisting symptoms. And then even if healthcare providers know about the first 2 steps, they often don't know that it's a rehabilitative injury. Or even if they know that, they don't know who to send people to. What type of specialist? Yep.
And so it's not just me and it's not just Michelle. I'm sure many of you know this, that a lot of people get concussions. Epidemiology is hard. It's evolving with how many injuries go undiagnosed, but concussions are a major and hidden public health epidemic. One epidemiological study from 2018 estimated 56 million concussions globally annually, which is 1.77 concussions per second. So in the 15 minutes that we've been speaking so far, that's almost 2,000 concussions occurring worldwide. And anywhere between 15 and some studies show as high as 50% of patients are getting persisting symptoms. So Concussion Alliance, we are trying to do our part helping to solve this hidden epidemic. We're doing it through unmatched online education for patients, which we're going to be talking about mostly today. We're doing it through continuing medical education for professionals. We're doing it through our unique undergraduate internship program, and we're doing it through supporting research. We're not doing it alone either. I'm a patient and Malayka's an advocate, and we've spent a lot of time in this world, but we are wanting to make sure that our resources are evidence-based, they're reliable, they can be, patients can know that these are resources that were built for them, but with the help of professionals. So that's our expert advisory board. And our board has an incredibly strong representation of decades of high-level clinical and research experience as well in this field. I'm going to go backwards in talking about the kind of key things that we're doing so that we can get to our education last. We've been doing research collaborations with institutions like Harvard Mass General, the University of Washington Brain Lab, Mount Sinai, the Uniformed Services University. We help recruit for study participants and our sort of serve on community panels. We run this remote undergraduate internship for the next generation of healthcare and public health professionals, which has trained over 120 interns from 17 colleges and universities in the last 6 years. In 2022, we published a continuing medical education course for emergency medicine and primary care physicians to address some of the stuff Malayka was talking about, for making sure that these first point of care providers are able to help set up patients for success. And that's now available on the American Medical Association's Education Hub, which is amazing. And one thing that's sort of a hybrid of provider and patient education is our Concussion Update newsletter. So it provides in-depth synopses of recent news and research in all areas of concussion, going out to about 3,400 people. And that is really a mix of patients and providers and allied professionals, whether those are people in sports, people in law, in HR, and all of these other areas. There's a QR code to our newsletter. You'll also get a pop-up, and there's a banner on our website if you're checking out our website. So we're here mostly to talk about patient-facing resources, accessible patient-facing resources, evidence-based patient-facing resources. And the reason that we're here talking about it is because we have 55 different evidence-based patient-facing resources.
Yeah, we've had over 500,000 unique visitors to our website. At the moment, it's all organic search, but we're pleased to be shortly implementing Google Ad grants so we can reach more people.
Yeah, and this is the most comprehensive concussion website, patient-facing concussion website in the world. So our resources really break down into kind of 3 primary categories, the patient-facing resources. The first primary category is what we call our About Concussions resources. And those of you who are clinicians will see we've sort of framed it as a learning objective. So what's the patient's learning objective for going to these resources? And that's basically, why do I feel like this? People's conception of concussion is often really different from their actual experience once they become a patient. And what we found, our goals are, we're trying to decrease fear and anxiety and misappropriation of symptoms. Patients will say, like, am I overreacting? Or they'll have symptoms that are different from their friends or what they see, athletes go through, and they'll wonder, did I do something wrong? We hear a lot of people with persisting symptoms with a lot of fear about CTE and neurodegeneration. And we're hoping not only to decrease that, but to increase agency and increase advocacy skills. Get patients to know that it's a rehabilitative injury so that they may need some help to recover, or that they need to keep an eye on their mental health because there's a really complex and strong bidirectional relationship between concussion and mental health, or that they may need to talk to their, their general practitioner or their PCP about a particular symptom after a particular amount of time. I've been having headaches and neck pain for more than 10 days, and that means that I'm supposed to get a referral to cervicovestibular rehabilitation. Let me show you this and I'll talk about best practices. So this is the Concussion Alliance website. This is our index page about concussions, what happens to your brain, different symptoms, and these are all links to the same things that you'll see in this sort of resource overview. So we're looking at a lot of the systems that can get disrupted, or the symptoms that people are feeling, and sort of what is going on there. When we're looking at this, we're thinking about best practices being, is the language accessible? Are the visuals accessible? Is it easy for someone who is coming into this totally blind to understand, especially when we're talking about describing these symptoms? And then for me as a patient thinking about this, it's so important. It's been such a game changer for me to have language and have frameworks for talking to doctors, for talking to employers, for talking to my school, for talking to friends and family, to say, like, that I have these symptoms and they are based on, disrupted systems and issues, like my autonomic nervous system was messed up, and it makes me more anxious. It made me have more exercise intolerance and all of these other things. And just to have these frameworks creates so much more peace of mind, less anxiety and confusion. I know I got to go through these faster. Our treatments pages, this is really the core. It's all about actionable. It's how do I get better? Who do I see for that? Malayka, do you want to talk a little bit about these goals?
Yeah. So we want them to patients to understand the range of treatments and where they might find those treatments. So, what is a concussion clinic, and how, maybe an outpatient rehabilitation clinic might be better, or if neither of those are available in your area, how do you build your own team? Because you usually need a couple different types of providers. And then each treatment page will talk about the treatment and what to expect in a clinic. And then really importantly, who provides that treatment? Is there a certain kind of certification that might make them more knowledgeable? And then there's buttons where you can click on a button and it takes you to a professional association that has search tools. So, neuroautomatist search tools, for example. So you're not left in the dark. Not only do you know who should be seeing you, but you have tools to find that person in your area. Okay, you want to go back to the slide, Connor?
Yeah, so these are, again, this is our what we call our index page, and it's the same thing as you'll see here. All of these treatments out here, medical and rehabilitative, complementary and alternative, and all of this other stuff.
And one of the things that makes us stand apart is that we do have hyperlinks to all the research or the international guidelines that back up what we're saying. It's not intrusive, but you can always find where we got the info.
Yeah, we're linking to research whenever we're making claims. And aside from that best practice, we're also thinking about actionability of resources in this. Like, we're helping patients like Michelle, right, gain confidence, gain momentum, and sort of this idea of patient-centered care of, like, patients are, we want to empower patients to take responsibility for their recovery. And again, this concept of peace of mind, like ease of use of these resources, ease of use of finding providers, and knowing what it's going to feel like in clinic and what assessments and care is going to look like, is peace of mind. And like having a plan, or even knowing that you have the tools to make a plan, that's less stress and more hope. Our final kind of resource are what we call our communities resources. And so this is really about, like, how are my symptoms in recovery going to change my day-to-day living? And also, like, how can I proactively navigate this and create a supportive community for myself, whether that is in my friends and family, in my workplace, in my school. There are so many ways that concussion touches and affects and shifts your life, whether that's during recovery, whether that's dealing with persisting symptoms, whether that's, going through your rehabilitation process. Everyone's life is different, and everyone is individualized, and this is an individualized injury that requires sort of not only precision medicine, but precision advocacy. So geriatric, concussions in older adults are going to look different from adolescents, are going to look different from infants. Accommodations and support, social support and academic support, it's going to look different in high schools versus elementary schools versus colleges, and it's going to look different in the workplaces. And then, you have things where if folks have a pre-existing disability, that could cause, like complicating factors for their rehabilitation. Intimate partner violence survivors are going to likely have a lot of other comorbid concerns and life stressors that are going to need to be addressed. There's a lot of information about concussion in women and girls, and both sex differences physiologically with injury and recovery, and also gender differences in sort of time to reach care and relationships with the healthcare system. And so the goal here is that patients using these community resources build custom like toolkits for their specific life, toolkits that help them manage their mental health, understand, their demography, specific risk factors and how to navigate them, and also really like how do they advocate for best practice-based returns to learn, return to sport, return to work, and really return to life. So as you'll see, we have a dozen different community resources, and these really are aimed at as broad a sort of spectrum of community as we can, and we're always working on increasing this access to community resources. I know we're running a little short on time, so I'll get to it. I very quickly want to run through sort of how these are all connected and the sort of flow chart that we imagine to take patients who fall into the cracks or who are at risk of falling through the cracks and build this beautiful little ramp that deposits them into better outcomes. So searching for, cognitive problems after concussion online, because it's been 2 months and maybe your other symptoms, it's been, say you've had a concussion, it's been 2 months, all of your sort of somatic symptoms, your headache, your neck pain, maybe a little bit of dizziness have lapsed, but you just feel off and you don't know how, and you don't necessarily attribute it to your concussion, but you're Googling one day and you find our page on cognitive dysfunction after concussion, and you learn the term executive function and executive dysfunction, and you start putting together, you didn't always used to have to do grocery lists when you went grocery shopping, or you're having to use your calendar, your planner more often than usual, or you're missing school pickups and doctor's appointments and things like that. And under the treatment and self-management strategies under this page, you can find a reference to a resource called on cognitive rehabilitation therapy. And so you click on that, and that takes you from our About Concussions resource on cognitive dysfunction to our treatments page on cognitive rehabilitation, which is all about like, what is cognitive rehabilitation therapy? When should you look into it? Like, what does it look like? What can you expect? How do you access it? And maybe you learn from this page that speech language pathologists are people who are commonly referred to for cognitive rehabilitation therapy after concussion. And you've never had any problem speaking, or maybe you've never even heard of a speech language pathologist, so it's not something that you would have looked at. But essentially, now you know that you can send a message in MyChart or whatever other healthcare communications framework you have, and set up an appointment, or maybe even a telehealth appointment, to talk with your primary care provider about a referral to a speech language pathologist to be evaluated for cognitive dysfunction after concussion. And then maybe you're an adult, maybe you're in the workplace, you're in the workforce, and you check out our resource on workers and workplaces, and you learn about tools for creating accommodations for yourself as you return to the workplace, and how to advocate for those accommodations with your boss, and how to create a customized best practice based return to work strategy for yourself, so that you don't feel pressured or stressed to return before you need to, or push yourself too hard and potentially set yourself back. Malayka is going to chat a little bit about subacute management and self-care, which is kind of another little area of resources that we have.
So, I mean, unfortunately, we realize that not everybody has access to healthcare or timely healthcare. So these guides can help whether or not you have healthcare. So the first section are very specific guidelines. They pull from international guidelines, and they create very patient-friendly explanations, whether you're a parent, whether it's yourself as an adult. So the first three are step by step. What do you do when you just had it, like no cocooning, relative rest, keep your screen used to an hour a day, that kind of thing. And the navigating concussion is a flyer, which we'll go into. And then the other section, so those are sort of time-based. What do you do at 24 to 48 hours? What do you do at 7 days? What time frame should you be asking for a referral for rehabilitation? And then the other one is just sort of general self-care based on systemic categories, and they're all evidence-based. So what do you need to know about sleep? What do you need to know about exercise, about nutrition? Sensory sensitivity includes sound and light. Little tiny hacks that are super important, like it's okay to wear a hat with a visor inside if you're having trouble with fluorescent lights, but don't wear sunglasses inside. That can make your symptoms worse. And then again, emotional wellness. What can you do for yourself, and what kind of tools are out there that you can access for free?
So Malayka mentioned our flyer. This is something that we're working on building more, is really even more tight, even more accessible deliverables for patients. We already have some providers who are going to be using these in their clinics. If you're interested in this, you can download it from our website. It's under the treatments tab. Also, please feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to work with more clinics to get this involved. But essentially, this is the front and back of a one-page sheet where we talk about myths, we talk about concussion symptoms versus red flag symptoms, and then the back side really focuses on how do you implement essentially practices for taking care of yourself for returning to activity based on the most current recommendations from the 6 consensus on concussion in sport. It's particularly this when to seek care for additional symptom rehabilitation, because I think it's really, really important to give expectations and timelines for concussion patients, especially people who they feel like it's a 1 week and you're back kind of injury, and then they're maybe at 7 days and their symptoms aren't any better than they were at day 1 or day 0, and they're starting to freak out. And so normalizing the 4-week standard recovery timeline and the incidence of persistent symptoms, and emphasizing the correct timelines for referral to rehabilitative care can really empower patients to really be on top of their recovery, to take responsibility for their recovery, and to minimize the risk of a poor outcome. And I just wanted to close with a quote. These resources, I like to say that they are patient-facing but provider relevant. We really want these resources to be able to help educate providers, to help providers educate their patients, to be an adjunct to in-clinic patient education. We know that providers really are strapped for time with patients. This is a very subtle injury. There's a lot of nuance here, and we want to work with providers to essentially help streamline your time in clinic, where you can be focusing on actionable work with patients and using our resources to help answer some of their more complex questions that you don't really have time to tease out in clinic. Sarah Etheridge, who's an expert advisory board member, and a fantastic physical therapist at the Concussion Care Center of Virginia, says, I absolutely love your website because of the diverse information on it. There are resources for patients with just about any type of symptoms they are dealing with. It is incredibly patient-friendly, which is why I refer patients over to your website regularly. She just actually wrote this down with Malayka in front of our poster in Montreal last week, so we wanted to share it. Thank you so much. That is it for our talk, and we're really excited to hear questions from y'all and sort of continue the conversation.
Great. Thank you so much, Connor and Malayka. That was excellent. And I just I have to commend both of you. Your website is incredibly impressive. It's true. There's just so much information in there. And I also think it's just incredible that you've done such work in not only educating individuals that have had the concussions, but I absolutely love this idea of educating healthcare professionals and moreover up and coming healthcare professionals, right? So that is incredibly unique and really quite amazing. Um, so just to everyone watching, I just say if you have any questions, please enter those into the Q&A. But I was curious, I know you've developed this course for healthcare professionals that's available on the AMA Education Hub. I don't know too much about that because I'm not a physician. But have you looked into other countries? Is that like the CMA, the Canadian Medical Association? Like, is that?
Yeah, I mean, we would
I
love.
don't know if they have anything similar, but
Yeah, we would love to do that. Would have to do a little bit of research about the accreditation process. We are
right,
a pretty
yeah,
small organization, so we worked with a third party continuing medical education company to develop the course. They're the accreditors.
I
So the course is available through our website, not just the AMA. It's under the CME tab. And if you don't
okay.
want to take it for credit, you can also just view it as a 45-minute webinar. The really cool
Oh,
thing about
really?
the course, yeah, we heard from actually a rugby coach in the UK who watched the webinar and said it was incredibly helpful for navigating concussions with his athletes.
Yeah. Oh, that's
But
fantastic. Yeah, I think the more that we have out there, certainly in Ontario, we have something called Project Echo, where we're, working to educate healthcare professionals in smaller groups. But I think the more that we have out there, the better. So
yeah,
thank you so
well,
much for that.
you're very welcome. And I just want to take a quick minute to shout out two fantastic Canadian resources, which are the Concussion Alliance training tool out of the BC Injury Research and Prevention Unit. They have a 2-hour course for medical professionals that you get a certification. That team is doing absolutely fantastic work. Shalina Babul and all of her colleagues there. And then also the MOOC, the Massive Open Online course out of the University of Calgary. And Malayka, it's Catherine. Oh, you're Catherine Schneider at the University of Calgary is leading up that effort, and I think that opens in April. So if you're interested in
Okay.
taking it, it's a massive open online course on concussion education, and I think that one is international. They just had a presentation about it, so it's available freely anywhere, and they're doing great work. And one other quick thing I want to say before we get to questions is to your point about educating young providers. We're starting to do some education like patient colloquium talks with second-year medical school students. We'd love to be more involved with concussion education in medical schools. But if you're thinking about it, the advice to rest was international consensus in the consensus statements until the fifth conference and subsequent publishing of the fifth consensus statement which was in June of 2017. So these early adopting schools who were really on top of it and changed their curriculum in medical school for the fall of 2017, those students who got that up-to-date curriculum that's not rest until symptoms resolve, they are just finishing residency, they are just finishing fellowships, and that's for the
Mhm.
people who are really, really on top of it. So,
Yeah.
it makes sense with the overall dearth of concussion education, continuing education for providers, and with sort of relatively how recently this paradigm has not only shifted but done a total 180 as far as
Yeah.
acute rest. It's really, really easy to see why so many concussion patients are getting this advice.
Absolutely. Okay. And thank you too for your ongoing support of this series, which we had sort of learned after the fact that you'd been, advertising for us. So thank you. Okay, I'm just going to go back and forth here. Uh, Okay. There was just a question about resources. Do you know about the resources available on the Canadian Concussion Center website? And are these on your list? I guess that was a question I had more the Canadian US, because obviously you are in the US. Um, so I'm not sure in terms of resources that you're listing, are they mostly US based or do you have Canadian based things as well?
Yeah, Malayka, do you wanna?
Sure. We love the Canadian resources. They're, I mean, they're in many ways our go-to. Um, we do have a page on, well, that's a good question. Is like we do have a resource page that needs a little updating. And while we advertise the Canadian Concussion Center's webinars every single newsletter, we may not have other resources by your team on our resource page. So I will make sure that we get that done. And we do, anytime there's a new MOOC, the massive online open course, we do promote that. I've taken it twice. It's fabulous. And you do not need to be a provider. You can be a patient. It's superb. It is a time-based thing. So when registration opens in April, sign up and take it. And PEDS concussion, if you're a provider, PEDS concussion is it .com or .org? I'm not sure.
You can start calm.
Yeah, they're living guidelines. So they're update where the sixth consensus gets updated every 4 years. PEDS concussion, they have a process where they have 50 providers and clinicians in the US and Canada primarily, basically voting on adding new recommendations. So if you're a provider, monthly, a pediatric um, provider, that is a go-to. Absolutely. There is also a Canadian adult living guideline. Connor, do you want to continue on?
Oh yeah, I just was saying, yeah, shouting out the adult living guideline as well, which Ken is making an effort with. But yeah, I believe we have some resources from the Canadian Concussion Center as well, but that's again something we'll have to double check and incorporate them throughout our website as we find them.
Mhm. Great. Thanks so much. We have a question. So this is Connor to you. So this is a little bit more of in terms of your situation and your personal situation. And I was kind of wondering the same. And they said, I believe it was said that you were still having headaches after 9 years. And they're just asking, like, is there anything that you have found to be helpful?
Yeah, I actually have a pretty bad headache right now. I bumped my head on the corner of my window molding last night, digging around behind the couch. So I'm even more. My headache's worse a little bit than usual. Um, yeah, I found a lot of different things have helped. Honestly, like different kinds of physical therapy have been really, really helpful for me. Uh, Having a continuous headache, like every waking moment all the time, turned into like TMJ pretty quickly. So getting PT for the TMJ aspect of it. Actually, our About Concussions page, building our About Concussions page on headaches was incredibly helpful for me because it helped me sort of learn how to identify Oh, okay. Right now, what I'm feeling is more of a cervicogenic headache. And so I know that I have different PT exercises to work on for my cervicogenic headache, or this is TMJ, or this is tension type. Um, Personally, I found a couple of complementary and alternative therapies. I mean, I know that everyone is different. For me, they were really helpful. I saw a pretty well-respected craniosacral therapist in Seattle, and that was really helpful. Acupuncture has also been really helpful for me because I have a lot of like myofascial trauma in my fascia, and so that helps with that kind of work. Um, I've tried some different like uh I forget the word, but like medication oriented interventions as well. And they were a little bit less helpful for me. I tried a couple different SSRIs and gabapentin, uh botulinum toxin, occipital nerve block. But again, like these are going to be things that are going to help some people and not others. And I think part of it is that I tried those when I had already been having chronic symptoms for 5 years. And so the way that this sort of injury can cascade into chronic illness can kind of shift. Right now it's like, 10 years later, a lot of my pain is more musculoskeletal and sort of chronic inflammation. So managing inflammation is really important. And then I forgot to shout out the first really impactful thing for me was vision therapy. I went 2 years with undiagnosed all sorts of ocular motor dysfunction because I didn't have double vision. I didn't have noticeable balance problems. But what I did have was horrible smooth pursuits. I had like no near point convergence control. I had all sorts of problems with my eyes bouncing all over the place. And so I went and saw a neuro optometrist 2 years in, and that massively reduced my fatigue actually, because it really was just exhausting to be awake when my ocular motor system was just not processing with any kind of efficiency.
Yeah, I wanted to add as a parent advocate that when Connor was at the sport concussion clinic, I know the physician said, well, your eyes seem a little off, but we don't have any baseline, so you're fine. And your balance seems a little off, we don't have any baseline, and zero referrals. And this is a premier concussion clinic. It was in 2017. Hopefully they're doing a little better. But so we had no idea that there was vision issues. And it was actually a peer of Connor's who also had a concussion, who also had persisting symptoms, who was also having trouble doing college courses. And that young woman's mom and I were talking, and she mentioned vision therapy. And it was like, really? What? Like, it was not on our radar at all. Um,
Mhm.
and at the time, I couldn't find any health insurance coverage. It's gotten a little bit better. We just paid out of pocket for a diagnosis. It was a couple $100s. And that was just like 12, it was like a dozen different dysfunctions. So that opened up a whole world because then, of course, vision therapy was very helpful. And as I recall, Connor, it was much easier to do schoolwork and computer work, right? Once you had the vision sorted out.
Yeah, absolutely. And the nice thing is that I still have those tools and exercises and sort of rehabilitation techniques for when I start feeling more fatigue now.
Mhm. Yeah, that's really interesting. There was actually, I wasn't able to attend much of it, but Dr. Tatter had headed up. Indeed, I think there's a lot of work being done, on the vision front. And there was a sort of a mini conference that happened today. I wasn't able to attend much of it, but you're absolutely right. My sense is that, vision changes post-concussion are incredibly, incredibly common. And so you were saying it was about 2 years after your last concussion that you actually started doing some of that and you did find it helpful.
Yeah. I mean, various researchers, we've seen studies citing 60 to 70% of patients have some kind of vision dysfunction. And
Mhm.
for many patients, it's transient, right? Like the system will find its way back to equilibrium on its own. But, for persisting symptoms, I think particularly for persisting fatigue, that can be really worth checking out, because vision dysfunction, I think, is one of the more subtle kinds of persisting symptoms in terms of how it can present.
Hmm. Hmm.
We fairly recently redid our vision therapy page because we realized that care through a neurooptometrist or someone who's trained at the College of Vision Development can be quite expensive. So we worked with a leading person in this field, and she identified that there are PTs that can do sort of a less complex version of diagnosis and therapy exercises, and so that's a good for someone where money and access is a problem. We wanted to
Yeah,
always keep that in mind, and so you'll find that on our vision therapy pages, those alternatives as well.
interesting. Yeah, it's the same here in Canada. I mean, most people wouldn't have, I think, to the best of my knowledge, would not have coverage for something like vision therapy, so it would often be paid out of pocket.
Yeah.
Um, we do have a question. Do you collaborate at all with the Concussion Legacy Foundation?
We've had some connections with them, and collaborated with them on a couple of little pieces of programming. Um, I think even more so than collaborating, what we found is that we really we are sort of we're both kind of, I think, letting each other do what we're best at, and we can cover a lot more. We're covering a lot more ground. Concussion Legacy Foundation is doing amazing work in talking about prevention and safety and risk reduction in youth sports, and in professional sports. And they're really pushing the needle on awareness and recognition of chronic traumatic encephalopathy, and other progressive neurodegenerative diseases, following, concussions, repeated head impacts, and stuff like that. They're doing fantastic work in that space, and it also sort of frees us up a little bit, as it were, to really hone in on these sort of actionable education for patients. Like, I don't know if you have anything to say
Yeah,
there.
I think you covered it. Yeah.
That's great. Thank you. Um, we have someone asking, I think this is back to the um, headaches, Connor. They're asking about Botox. I think you mentioned you tried Botox.
I did, yeah. I found, I mean, I think that this is a thing that has been my experience, and has been, I've heard from other concussion patients as well, is that particularly, beyond 3 to 6 months, um, they're sort of, when we're talking about a more chronic version of this injury, I think my experience is that the rehabilitation process becomes more complex, because, the body the body responds to chronic illness, right? And so, my pain, both from a neurologic standpoint and from like a musculoskeletal standpoint, is really a lot more complex now than it was 5 years ago, and than it was 8 years ago. Um, I think Botox I had 2 series of injections. I think that they were somewhat helpful. They weren't a silver bullet. They didn't, take my pain away. But again, I think, my pain, has a component of a musculoskeletal component. It has a fascial component. It has a neurological component with, we know that, the body's, pain receptors can become hypersensitized over time, with chronic pain, right? And so, particularly with chronic injury, and chronic brain injury, and persistent symptoms like this, what I found is that realistically, there's not really gonna be a silver bullet, even for any one given symptom necessarily, but a lot of things together can really improve, people's outcomes.
Hmm. Hmm. That's fantastic. Um, we do have a comment. I think this is more just speaking to, some of the frustration I think that we often hear in individuals that have had a concussion, and this individual saying, they're 3.5 years in, they're still waiting for a speech language assessment, vision therapy refused by insurance, despite having an assessment. So yeah, there can be a lot of frustration that can actually exacerbate symptoms in, as far as I'm concerned. And also saying they had to do all their own research into providers. So, I think again, this is, yeah, they're saying, both great and sad to hear that this may be more the norm than the exception. Um,
I'm so sorry to hear that. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think there's any silver bullet. Connor, if you want to show them, we have a whole dedicated Find Providers page. Some of it is international if you're Canadian. But what we do, it's primarily broken down by type of specialist. And then there's links to all the professional association search tools. We have a few by state and province, but we're not a big enough staff to really keep on top of that. But what I usually suggest is like if you're trying to find, say, some, a neuro-optometrist or something in your area, use the professional association search tool and also just use Google because sometimes those professional associations aren't the most up to date. But like if
mhm.
you know
Yeah.
the name of the type of provider and Google combine the two and you'll probably find something.
Yeah. And Lynn, I just want to say I really appreciate you sharing this. I think that this is a really complex thing. Patient advocacy here is it's very delicate. You kind of have to be a bit of a diplomat. It's interesting. You kind of have to end up, I feel like you have to sort of build a complex kind of debate style argument sometimes for why you believe building evidence for why you believe that you need a certain kind of referral. And I think that that's a big thing that Concussion Alliance resources can be helpful is that being able to speak the same language that your clinician is speaking, I think can really make make that hill a little less steep. And I think another thing that I want to mention too is it's really important. Mental health care is so critical in this, and we've actually heard from clinics that when they suggest mental health care to patients, sometimes the patients um, get pretty upset. And that's because they've had 4 or 5 or 6 providers suggest that their problems might be entirely psychosomatic or motivated by my mental health issues following this. And so I just want to say, like, it's this is a complex, a nuanced injury. It's challenging, it's multidisciplinary, and we're still really like in a space where we're constantly learning more about it. And so of course it's going to impact your mental health. It's going to change what activities of daily living you can do. You might be in pain more often or all the time. Your friends and family might not understand. It might be harder for you to work or go to school or do the sports or other hobbies that you care about. Like, of course, mental health is going to be impacted. And so I think that that's something maintaining an openness to including mental health care as part of your multidisciplinary care, even just like to help with navigating the experience of living with this if you're dealing with persisting symptoms. Susan, I also see a great question about what health professionals other than your general MD should you see if you have persisting concussion symptoms, 3 to 4 to 12 weeks. These are the guidelines for recovery resources that Malayka shouted out are fantastic for that. And Malayka, I'm sure you have some great specific recommendations too.
Yeah, so yeah, Susan, thanks for teeing up a really great question. So um, one of the great resources is to look for an outpatient, so you would need a referral there, but an outpatient rehabilitation clinic. They're usually associated with hospitals. They have most of the staff, multidisciplinary staff that you would need. So speech language pathologists, SLPs, PTs, neuropsychologists, sometimes OTs. They typically don't have vision. That's the one thing they don't have. And they're all on one roof. And I would say 99% of the time, I'm just making it up, general providers, family practitioners do not know to refer there. And yet they work with concussions all the time. And we had an experience where Connor was at that sports concussion clinic who did not refer Conor to what Conor did need, obviously, was PT, vision therapy. And they were literally like 2 floors above on the same medical tower. They were 2 floors above an outpatient rehabilitation clinic that had all the providers there. Also, any kind of outpatient rehabilitation clinic, you need sort of someone to, sort of triage is the technical word. So that's typically done by, here's a new provider type that a lot of people don't know. It's a physiatrist. Maybe Connor, you could type out the spelling. A physiatrist. So they're physical medicine and rehabilitation physicians. That's what they're trained to do, is sort of see what's going on and refer you to all the different types of sub-providers that you could use. So either find an outpatient rehabilitation clinic, which often you will see a physiatrist first, or if you can't find a clinic like that, ask to see a physiatrist. Physiatrists also can get brain injury medicine certification. So if you could find did I get that right, Connor?
Yeah, so physiatrists, psychiatrists, and neurologists can all, in the US at least, I'm not sure about in Canada, can get subspecialty board certification in brain injury medicine.
Yeah, so then back to Google, right? That's one thing you could punch in, and you will need a referral, but most general practitioners don't even know to refer. So you're way, a good place if you can even start talking to them about, this is who I could see. It's funny because I called a really good outpatient rehab center here in Seattle, and I was like, your website doesn't say anything about handling TBI and concussions, do you? And they're like, well, we do it all the time, but nobody knows. So
Yeah,
that's a good
it's
hack.
spinal cord injury, ABI and stroke are often like what's advertised, but they do a lot of mild brain injury often.
Yeah, here in Toronto, I mean, I work on inpatient traumatic brain injury, and we did at a point in the past see some mild traumatic brain injury and concussion, but unfortunately now we really don't. So those individuals are, typically having to find it usually in the community.
Yeah.
You don't have outpatient rehabs there?
We have outpatient rehab, but certainly the outpatient neuro rehab that I've worked on, we had ceased taking. We didn't have the resources to, so it was more severe brain injury that, we do have some. We've got a research clinic at Toronto Rehab that is taking individuals, but it's challenging to find the care, and certainly, yeah, it's a great suggestion though about physiatry. So I'm conscious of the time. I think maybe we will have to sort of end there, but thank you so much to both of you. I know you're both tired from having attended the Montreal conference, long days. And it sounds like it was a great conference, but we really appreciate you sharing your learnings and very personal, situation of what you've been through, Conor and Malayka as a mom, which is, I think something that a lot of people can relate to, and just a fantastic website. So encourage everyone to check that out. So thanks so much. And I hope, thanks all for attending. Just to remind you before I forget, we will be sending a very short survey. So if you could complete that and provide any feedback, suggestions, anything that you have. And then in 2 weeks, we have on April 8th, we've got Dr. Charles Tatter and Patrick Brown. Always a really excellent session. They're going to be talking about concussion in the law, navigating legal challenges after a brain injury. So hope that you can join us for that. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Dr. Rutan. Thanks, Dr. Tatter. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending.